It began with shattered glass, but ended with something far darker. Kristallnacht was not a spontaneous riot. It was a coordinated assault, ordered from above and carried out with ruthless precision. The Nazi regime slowly conditioned the German public to accept, even ignore, state-sponsored anti-Semitism. By 1936, Jews were banned from professional jobs, universities, and even owning radios. This wasn't just exclusion. It was isolation. Anti-Jewish policies were not spontaneous. They evolved over years of escalating legislation and dehumanizing propaganda. Since coming to power in 1933, Adolf Hitler had waged a relentless campaign against Germany's Jewish population. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped Jews of their citizenship and rights. Daily life became a maze of humiliation, restriction, and fear. By 1938, the Nazi regime was ready to escalate from oppression to organized violence. In November 1938, Herschel Greenspan, a Jewish teenager whose family had been expelled from Germany, walked into the German embassy in Paris. Enraged by his family's suffering, he shot diplomat Ernst von Rath. 2 days later, von Rath died. Nazi propaganda used the assassination as a pretext to launch a campaign of terror. The Nazi leadership saw the silence not as condemnation, but as permission to continue. At the Evian conference just months earlier, 32 nations debated helping Jewish refugees, and nearly all refused. The United States recalled its ambassador, but no further steps were taken. While Nazi propaganda painted the violence as an outpouring of public outrage, the truth is chilling. The pogrom was orchestrated at the highest levels. On November 9th, 1938, Nazi leaders gathered at the Burger Brockler in Munich to commemorate Hitler's failed beer hall push. When news of the diplomat's death reached Joseph Goebbels, he took the stage and gave what amounted to a green light for vengeance. Thinly veiled in the language of public protest. Instructions were quietly relayed from Berlin to regional SS and SA leaders. The demonstrations are not to be organized by the party, but they will be tolerated and should not be interfered with. News of Kristallnacht shocked the world. Photos of shattered storefronts and burning temples filled international newspapers. World leaders condemned the violence. But no one intervened. No sanctions, no action, just silence. For Hitler and Goebbels, it was a test, and the world failed. The Nazi regime forced the Jewish community to pay for the damage. A collective fine of 1 billion Reichsmarks. Jewish life in Germany changed overnight. Children were expelled from schools. Jews were banned from public spaces. And many began desperately seeking ways to flee the country. Kristallnacht marked the moment when persecution turned into systematic terror. It was not the beginning of the Holocaust, but it was the unmistakable turning point. In the days that followed, the streets of Germany grew quiet again. But the silence was more chilling than the shattered glass. Kristallnacht wasn't just a warning. It was a promise that the worst was yet to come. August 23rd, 1939. In a move that stunned the world, two bitter ideological enemies, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, signed a non-aggression pact. Known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, it was more than just a diplomatic shot. It was a strategic earthquake that would trigger the deadliest war in human history. By 1939, Europe stood on the edge of chaos. Germany had annexed Austria, dismantled Czechoslovakia, and violated every promise made at Munich. Meanwhile, Joseph Stalin, leading the Soviet Union, watched with growing suspicion. Although communism and fascism were sworn enemies, Hitler and Stalin shared one grim desire: territorial expansion. As Britain and France tried and failed to build an alliance with Stalin, Hitler acted fast. On the night of August 23, 1939, German Forest Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop flew to Moscow. He met Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov in a quiet office deep inside the Kremlin. The result? A public agreement of non-aggression between their two nations. But the real deal was made in secret. A classified protocol carved Eastern Europe into two spheres of influence. Poland would be split in half. The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania would fall to the Soviets. Finland and parts of Romania were also on Stalin's wish list. The world was stunned. Just weeks earlier, the Soviets had denounced fascism in loud terms. Now they stood hand in hand with Hitler. Britain and France, desperately hoping for a Soviet alliance, were left out in the cold. Meanwhile, Poland, caught between two ruthless powers, found itself marked for destruction. Western democracies saw this as treachery, but Hitler and Stalin saw it as opportunity. Why would these two enemies cooperate? For Hitler, the Pact meant avoiding a two-front war, the mistake that cost Germany dearly in World War I. For Stalin, the deal bought time. His military was still recovering from brutal purges, and he wasn't ready to face Hitler in open war. Both sides knew the truce wouldn't last. They were buying time and preparing for betrayal. The consequences were immediate. On September 1st, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland from the west. On September 17th, the Soviets invaded from the east. In just over 4 weeks, Poland was erased from the map. The Nazi-Soviet Pact had made it possible. In the weeks that followed, both occupiers committed atrocities. Mass executions, deportations, and the beginning of ethnic cleansing campaigns. To this day, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is remembered as one of the most cynical deals in modern history. It exposed the raw ambitions of both dictators. And it revealed how quickly morality could be sacrificed for power. The pact didn't prevent war, it guaranteed it. And when Hitler eventually broke the agreement in 1941, Stalin was caught off guard, but not surprised. Sometimes the enemy of your enemy is still your enemy. September 1st, 1939. Without warning, the skies above Poland roared to life. Stuka dive bombers screamed down, their sirens wailing. A sound designed to terrify. On the ground, columns of German tanks punched across the border, smashing through defenses in minutes. This was Blitzkrieg, lightning war, unleashed for the very first time. And in just weeks, the world would be at war. To understand why Poland was attacked, we need to rewind. The Treaty of Versailles, signed after World War I, left Germany humiliated, stripped of territory, military power, and national pride. Adolf Hitler promised to tear it up. Step by step, he did exactly that, remilitarizing the Rhineland in 1936, annexing Austria in 1938, and seizing the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia under the guise of protecting ethnic Germans. Britain and France believed appeasement could stop him. The Munich Agreement, they thought, had secured peace for our time. But Hitler had already set his sights on Poland. For Hitler, Poland was not just another target. It was Lebensraum, living space for the German people. He believed the Slavic nations were destined for subjugation. His speeches made clear that Poland's independence was never going to last. At the time, Poland stood defiant. With a population of 35 million and one of Europe's largest armies, Warsaw believed it could hold its own. But its strategy was rooted in World War I. Cavalry charges, fixed defenses, and alliances that assumed France and Britain would act quickly if war came. Then came the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a shocking non-aggression agreement between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Publicly, it promised peace between them. Secretly, it carved Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland was to be cut in two. For the Polish leadership, it was a nightmare realized. Surrounded on both sides by predatory powers, Poland knew that when war came, it would fight alone. At 4:45 a.m., the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein opened fire on the Polish garrison at Westerplatte. The first shots of the Second World War had been fired. Germany's plan was simple and devastating. Hit Poland with overwhelming speed and force. Waves of bombers destroyed rail lines, roads, and communication centers. Armored spearheads raced deep into the countryside, bypassing strong points and encircling defenders. The tactics stunned the world. This was blitzkrieg in practice. Tanks and planes working in perfect coordination, something no other army had mastered. Within days, two cities like Krakow and Lodz were under assault. Refugees flooded the roads, clogging escape routes and slowing Polish reinforcements. Britain and France had guaranteed Poland's borders. On September 3rd, after their ultimatums were ignored, both nations declared war on Germany. But there was little they could do. While Poland fought for its life, the Western Front stayed eerily quiet. Historians call it the Phony War. The invasion was not just a military campaign. It was a human catastrophe. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed in bombings. Entire towns were reduced to rubble. Refugees clogged the roads, desperate to escape the front lines. In the city of Wheeling, the Luftwaffe targeted civilians directly. Over 1,000 people died in the opening hours of the war. The brutality was deliberate. Hitler ordered his generals to wage a war of annihilation, not only against the Polish army, but against its people, its culture, and its leadership. Polish intellectuals, priests, executions became a grim daily reality. Yet even under occupation, the Polish spirit refused to break. Underground resistance movements began almost immediately. Networks of fighters, couriers, and spies who would wage a secret war for years. Within weeks, the Polish underground state was taking shape. An entire shadow government with its own schools, newspapers, and even courts. In the forests, resistance fighters began forming partisan bands, striking German patrols and then vanishing into the night. For Poland, the war was never truly over. It had only entered a new, hidden phase, one that would inspire occupied nations across Europe. By October 1939, Poland was gone, divided between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. But the war had only just begun. In the frozen north, another small nation would soon face an invasion of its own. And it would fight back with a courage that shocked the world. September 3rd, 1939. Britain and France declare war on Germany. Across Europe, millions brace for the thunder of battle. But then, nothing. For ordinary people, this was deeply confusing. Hadn't their leaders promised that war meant immediate danger? Families anxiously huddled around radios each night, waiting for word of battles that never came. The absence of fighting gave some a flicker of hope that perhaps diplomacy might still prevail. But for most, it only deepened the sense of dread. Followed was a strange and uneasy calm. A period the press soon called the Phony War. For 8 long months, the Western Front remained eerily quiet. French soldiers dug in behind the Maginot Line, while British troops, the so-called British Expeditionary Force, waited in northern France. Their enemy sat just a few miles away, behind Germany's Siegfried Line. Both sides loaded with weapons, but neither struck. To the men in the trenches, it felt like waiting for a storm that would not break. Letters home often spoke of boredom rather than bravery. Soldiers played cards, drilled endlessly, and tried to stave off the creeping anxiety that came with the waiting. The eerie stillness earned the front another nickname, the Sitzkrieg, or sitting war. In Britain, the home front prepared for the worst. Children were evacuated from cities. Gas masks were issued to every household. Air raid shelters dotted the streets. Night after night, cities went dark under strict blackout orders, as if danger might fall from the sky at any moment. But those feared German bombers never came. Londoners soon joked that the only raids they faced were the false alarms that sent them scrambling into the night. Instead of bombs, the war was fought with leaflets. The Royal Air Force dropped millions of pamphlets over German cities. Attempts at propaganda that the Germans mockingly called confetti raids. For many civilians, it seemed as though the war existed only in headlines. Yet beneath the quiet, armies were mobilizing, industries arming, and governments plotting their next moves. Elsewhere in Europe, the conflict was very real. In the bitter winter of 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland. Outnumbered and undersupplied, the Finns fought with extraordinary courage, holding off the Red Army in brutal, snowbound battles. The world took notice. Images of white-clad Finnish ski troops became symbols of resistance. And though Finland would ultimately lose, the war exposed the weaknesses of Stalin's army. Weaknesses Hitler would later underestimate. Meanwhile, Adolf Hitler stood triumphant after his conquest of Poland. He used the lull to consolidate power, prepare for the next strike, and unleash a flood of propaganda. To the German people, it seemed as though their Führer had delivered peace on his terms. But behind closed doors, Hitler's plans for the West were already in motion. German generals refined their blitzkrieg tactics, studying the lessons of Poland and preparing to unleash them on Western Europe. Secretly, Hitler's staff also debated the invasion of Norway, knowing its ports would be vital for securing iron ore shipments from Scandinavia. The quiet months were not wasted. They were the careful drawing of a knife before the plunge. By the spring of 1940, the so-called strange calm was about to shatter. On April 9th, German forces surged into Denmark and Norway. A month later, the Blitzkrieg thundered into Belgium, the Netherlands, and finally, France itself. The Phony War was over. Europe was about to face the full fury of Hitler's war machine. Looking back, the Phony War seems almost surreal. A pause in a catastrophe. A moment when people dared to hope the worst might never come. But in truth, it was only the silence before the storm.